Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Yaruss. I'm a professor at Michigan State University. I'm also the president of Stuttering Therapy Resources. I'm here in this video to talk a little bit about the OASES, the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering. It's one of the tools that's available from us at Stuttering Therapy Resource, and it is a fairly unique tool because it is designed not to assess the severity of stuttering, but rather to assess the impact of stuttering on a person's life. What I want to do in this brief video is tell you a little bit about why I developed the OASES and what its use can be in both your clinical process and your scientific research process. First of all, why I developed it. Years ago, more than 20 years ago now, I decided that I wanted to study treatment outcomes. That is, I wanted to figure out which treatments are more effective than which other treatments. In order to do that, of course, you have to have some idea of what the word effective means. You have to have some definition of treatment success. And indeed, many authors before me had thought about that and written about that. We had reports from people who stutter about that. And I was able to see pretty quickly that different people have different goals in mind. Different people have different definitions of success. And that's fine. That's as it should be. But I didn't know a way of measuring that. See, most of the research literature, particularly when I first started this endeavor a couple decades ago, was focused on how much changed in a person's speech as a result of therapy. Now, that's, of course, a sensible thing to ask. If the therapy that you're giving is focused on helping the person be more fluent, then it's sensible to ask, did the person actually get more fluent? But what we have to fold into that is the fact that not everybody is looking for increased fluency as a result of their therapy. Not everyone is looking for changing speech as the outcome of their therapy. And so one person might go into a therapy program and find it to be very successful for them because they gained improvements in their speech fluency. Great. Another person might go into that exact same therapy program, but be looking for something else from the therapy. And even though they may achieve gains in their fluency, may not find that therapy to be as fulfilling or as satisfying. The reverse is also true. Perhaps someone went into a therapy looking for improvements in attitude, and that's exactly what the therapy focused on. They'll be happy. If another person went into that exact same therapy looking for improvements in fluency, but that's not where the focus was, then they would be dissatisfied. And I rapidly discovered that for me personally, the number of possible outcomes that people could want from their therapy was huge. It was tremendous, much broader than just fluency, much broader than just fluency and attitude. It included how not only how they felt about themselves, but their thinking process. It included not just embarrassment about stuttering, but anxiety. It included not just a sense of guilt for not having achieved fluency, but a sense of shame for being defective in some way. It included not just speaking on the phone at work, but being able to introduce yourself at a party. It included being able to tell a joke, being able to be involved in a family discussion, engaging in intimate conversation, standing up for yourself. I rapidly learned that the number of possible goals for therapy was overwhelming. And so I needed to take a step back to see, can we describe the broad experience of stuttering? We need that description first in order to then talk about which aspects of a person's experience might improve as a result of this therapy or another therapy. So before I could develop the OASES, for me personally, I first needed to understand stuttering better. And I looked around for ways of describing the experience of stuttering in a comprehensive way. We know that different people experience stuttering differently. We know that there are as many different ways to stutter as there are people who stutter. And even more than that, because we know that it changes over time. But then it occurred to me, as it has occurred to many others, that stuttering is not the only field that faces that challenge. Indeed, there are many conditions for which the potential outcomes of therapy are broad and varied. There are many conditions for which the experience is broad and varied. And so I started thinking, well, what have other fields done about this? And I got lucky because it turns out that many other fields have already faced this. And indeed, the field of health and rehab in general has faced this, looking at what outcomes people might want from a wide range of interventions for a wide range of conditions. And they too had come to the conclusion that it was first necessary to describe the condition in some type of comprehensive way. It was indeed the World Health Organization that first put together a framework for describing the experiences of living with a health condition. And it was the World Health Organization's International Classification of Impairments, Disabilities, and Handicaps that was an attempt to capture all aspects of living with a health difficulty. Stuttering, of course, is not a health difficulty like having the flu. Stuttering, though, affects a person's daily life. So we're going to use health and well-being in this broader sense like this. And the World Health Organization's ICIDH, the International Classification of Impairment, Disability, and Handicap, was indeed an attempt to capture all aspects of a human's life when they're dealing with their health and well-being. And they were able to describe through this framework how one could have a difficulty in life, an impairment, that might lead to problems in living life the way you wanted, either in terms of things that you couldn't do the way you wanted to do them, which was termed in the old framework disability, and in terms of ways that that might disadvantage you compared to others or compared to how you wanted to be, and that was termed handicap. So those were those terms, impairment, disability, and handicap. That's where they came from way back in 1980. So we're going back quite a ways now. Over the years, the World Health Organization revised and updated that framework. They developed the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health as the successor to the ICIDH framework. The newer ICF framework, which was published in 2001, is a way of an updated way of describing how the impairments that you might experience, either in your body structure or your body function, could lead to adverse impact in your life. And that adverse impact was described in terms of limitations in your daily activities, things you couldn't do the way you wanted to, or restrictions in your ability to participate in life the way you want to. And importantly, the ICF framework added, in a formal sense, your own reactions to what you're experiencing and the reactions of those in the environment, which can also contribute to difficulties in your life. Now, the point of this video is not so much to talk about the ICIDH or the ICF. It's instead to say that there are frameworks that exist for describing the entirety of human well-being, human health experience. And that was exactly what I wanted for trying to understand stuttering. See, I based the early versions of the OASES on first the ICIDH and then later the ICF as the World Health Organization revised it, so that I was able to consider the entire experience of living with stuttering. And what you see in the OASES is that it's designed not just to measure speech. In fact, it doesn't measure speech at all. It measures rather the speaker's perception of speech. How does the speaker experience that impairment, that difficulty that leads to fluency disruptions, that sense of a loss of control, that sense of I can't say what I want to say now, that sense of feeling stuck, which leads to all of the speech disruptions that we're familiar with. But the ICH tells us that those impairments in body function or body structure can lead to adverse impact, but that's mediated to a very large extent, and in some cases almost entirely, by personal reactions and the reactions of those in the environment. So that's why the OASES is structured the way it is. See, the OASES is designed to measure the overall impact of stuttering. It does it in 4 components. The first component is that speaker's perception of the impairment. We call it general information, but it's general, overarching, overall belief statements and perceptions about a person's interaction with their own stuttering. But then section 2 is how does the speaker specifically react to stuttering? Now, we can talk about reactions in a whole bunch of different ways. In the OASES, we look at reactions in 3 categories. First of all, how the speaker feels. As I mentioned before, people who stutter can experience some pretty significant emotions surrounding their stuttering. Embarrassment and anxiety, of course, but also fear and shame, loneliness and isolation, frustration, of course. So we whittled down from a large list of potential emotions 10 key emotions that people who stutter frequently experience associated with their speech as the affective responses to stuttering, the feelings. We did the same thing with the behavioral responses. We started off with a large list of possible behavioral reactions like blinking your eyes, turning your head, discontinuing talking, tensing and struggling, avoiding and changing words. And we came up with 10 items that capture the behaviors or the actions that people take in response to their stuttering. And the third type of response, cognitive response, how they think about themselves as people who stutter, worrying about whether or not they can accept themselves or whether other people can accept them, how they think about whether or not it's okay to stutter and if they could ever tolerate their stuttering. These are their cognitions or their thoughts. So in section 2 of the OASES, we look at those affective, behavioral, and cognitive reactions to stuttering. Section 3 of the OASES is focused on functional communication. How much difficulty does a person have in performing daily activities that they want to do? For example, these are daily activities involving talking. For example, interacting with other people, introducing themselves, talking on the phone, speaking at work or at home or at school or at social situations, the key areas of a person's life. Not how much fluency disruption do they have, but how much difficulty do they have in communicating successfully? Because people who stutter will tell you, sometimes they may stutter a lot, but it's an easier situation for them. Sometimes they may not stutter much, but it can be a very hard situation for them. Here we are not focused on the fluency of their speech, but rather on the difficulty in their communication. That's section 3. And section 4 finally is the adverse impact of stuttering on their overall quality of life. How does stuttering affect their satisfaction with communication? How does stuttering affect their satisfaction with their ability to live the life the way they want, their sense of well-being, their interactions with others, their ability to pursue their spiritual or religious goals, their intimate interactions with others? How is stuttering affecting them on a broader scale? These 4 sections, general information or perception of impairment, reactions, functional communication across key situations, and adverse impact on quality of life, they all map directly to the ICIDH, or more recently the ICF, to ensure that we have described the overall experience of a person with respect to their stuttering. That's how the OASES was conceptualized. How was it developed? Well, what we did is we started off with a whole bunch of items, okay, in these various domains and piloted them. My colleague Bob Queasel worked with me on the original versions of the OASES. My colleague Craig Coleman worked with us on the school age and the teen versions when we split those off later in 2010. We piloted a whole bunch of items. We looked at which items traveled together and which ones seemed to address different constructs. We tested it first with small groups of experts and people who stutter, who are experts in their own right, of course, but speech language pathology specialists, stuttering specialists, and people who stutter. We did focus groups. We revised the instrument. We did more focus groups. We revised the instrument. We started doing larger and larger trials. And at this point, we have data from literally thousands of people from around the world identifying how they experience stuttering based on the World Health Organization's framework. That's what the OASES, that's how the OASES came to be. It was first published in Journal of Fluency Disorders back in 2006. Pearson Assessments published it for us in 2008 with a slight revision in 2010. First, it was just the adult versions, and then in 2010, we got the school age and the teen versions. Now, Stuttering Therapy Resources publishes it since 2016, and indeed, we have worked with research partners all around the world to develop translations of the OASES. We have translations in German and in Swedish and in Norwegian. We have one of the forms in Hebrew. We have many, many more and many more to come. Dutch, we've got many, many more to come. Okay, it's one of the key things that we're working on right now is finalizing many of the translations that have been prepared. We know from that translation work and we know from the validation work that this captures key aspects of this experience of stuttering for many, many people. So how do you use the OASES? Well, I use it at several points in my clinical therapeutic intervention process. First of all, it's designed to be able to be used as a diagnostic tool to describe for you the speaker's experience of stuttering so that you can answer questions about whether a particular individual is in need of therapy at a given time. There's three versions, as I mentioned, in age. There's the school age version, which is ages 7 to 12, the teenage version, which is ages 13 to 17, and the adult version, which is ages 18 and up. And those cover age appropriate questions across the same concepts, across those same constructs that we're trying to assess. So when I'm looking at a school-age child who stutters and I'm wondering, is this child ready for therapy at this point? Is he in need of therapy at this point? Well, I can look at my OASES data to see in what way is stuttering affecting him. Is it causing adverse impact that I want to address in therapy? And if it is causing adverse impact, I document it on the OASES, and that helps to justify the need for the therapy. Those of you in the United States public schools, you know that the way we're supposed to qualify a child for therapy is based on adverse educational impact, not based on the frequency of stuttering, not based on the severity of stuttering, but based on whether stuttering affects them. Well, that's what the OASES is for. So increasingly, people use the OASES as a way of documenting a need for therapy eligibility. Okay. But beyond just giving the test, what I do, second purpose, is I go through it with my students or my adult clients item by item by item during and throughout the therapy process to help them think more about what they're experiencing and to help me better understand what they're experiencing. This opens up dialogue. It opens up opportunities for us to talk with one another about how stuttering is affecting them. Third purpose in doing that, it helps me set my treatment goals so that I can figure out in what ways is stuttering affecting this person's life. And when I understand how stuttering is affecting this person's life, then I can directly write treatment goals to reduce that adverse effect on the person's life. So far I've got it for diagnostic purposes, I've got it for eligibility purposes, and I've got it for defining my treatment goals. I use it along the way in therapy too. If therapy is stalled sometimes, I'll give maybe part or all of the assessment to see, well, what has changed and where are we going now? Well, the what has changed, that gives us another purpose right there of assessing treatment outcomes. You may remember all the way back at the beginning of this video, I said that the reason I wanted to develop this is because I wanted to study treatment outcomes. And indeed, that brings us into one of the other purposes of the OASES to see, am I making a difference in the client's life? Because remember, your school-age kids, your adolescents, your adults, they are highly likely to continue stuttering in some fashion throughout their lives, even with the best therapy, right? But we can see, yes, even though they are still stuttering, is stuttering affecting them less? Have we reduced that adverse impact on their lives? And if we have, then we can say that we have achieved goals. We'll align those to what the client wanted at the beginning of therapy so that we can see, have we achieved their goals? Well, the OASES helps with that. But it bridges over into the research purpose then of assessing treatment outcomes, allowing us to compare treatment approaches. We've demonstrated through some of our research that the OASES is sensitive to changes in treatment like other tools. Some tools that focus on speech fluency, you can see changes in speech fluency. Treatments that focus on adverse impact, we can see changes in adverse impact. So there are multiple purposes for the OASES, and I use it for all of those purposes and more, in fact. What about how you actually do it? Well, it's a paper and pencil measure. It's designed to be completed by the client. Adults do it on their own. Teens do it on their own. School-age kids can do it on their own, though we find that for the 7 and 8-year-olds, the younger ones, it can be helpful for them to be able to ask you questions. It's no problem. It's no problem. They can ask you questions. You can talk about the items with them. It is, although standardized, it was standardized in such a way that the clinicians who were collecting data with me were talking to their clients as needed to clarify the items. So it's completely okay to have parents go through it with kids, clinicians go through it with kids, and that way you can learn also more about what the parents are thinking. Takes about 15 minutes, maybe sometimes 20 minutes for a person to fill it out. I've had some kids who really are maybe a bit perfectionists. They have a little trouble deciding between some of the items, so maybe they take a little bit longer. But in general, it's about 15 minutes to administer. The scoring is very simple. Everything on the OASES is on a 5-point Likert scale with higher scores indicating greater adverse impact. So all you do is average the scores. Yes, people may skip some items. There's some items that they might mark as not applicable. For example, items about employment. If they are not presently working, they might mark not applicable to those. Items about talking with siblings. If they haven't got siblings, they might mark not applicable to those. But otherwise, we just average up the scores. So it takes about 5 minutes for us to score as a clinician. 15 minutes for them to complete, about 5 minutes for us to score. It can be completed before your diagnostic evaluation. It can be completed while they're waiting for you, or often while I'm talking to a parent, I'll have the kid do it if I haven't sent it out in advance. Just so you know, on our international and our translated versions and our research versions, we also have a special protected PDF version, a print your own version. The primary reason for that is to save on international shipping for our translated versions. We prefer for people in the United States to use the printed English versions, but people in other countries can use print your own English version or print your own German, the Dutch, the Norwegian, the Swedish. Spanish is coming out very soon. By the time this is actually published, Spanish should be ready, and many, many more languages to come. So we're sensitive to the international shipping issues there. The score ranges between 1 and 5. 5, higher adverse impact. 1, lower adverse impact. As I mentioned, we've got data now from literally thousands of people who stutter all around the world, demonstrating that indeed this is sensitive to what their experiences are. And it helps you tailor your therapy so you're focusing on their specific needs. We have demonstrated good reliability, test retest reliability. We've demonstrated stability over the measure over time. So in the absence of therapy over a couple of weeks' time, the data are stable. Whereas, with the variability of stuttering, your severity measure may fluctuate during that time for no reason that's related to your therapy, or no reason that's related to the only reason is the person's experiences, and sometimes it seems kind of random. Well, with the OASES, we've demonstrated stability. So you know that when you show a change during therapy, it is likely to be due to the therapy or to other things that the client is doing that may be therapeutic. So that's a summary of what the OASES is and what the goals of the OASES are, what the methods are, how we developed it, how we validated it and tested it, how you get it. And the OASES is available at stutteringtherapyresources.com. That's a little publishing company that I have with my colleague Nina Reeves. Our mission at Stuttering Therapy Resources is to help SLPs, help people who stutter, and the OASES and related products is just one of the many ways that we seek to do that. I thank you for listening to this video. By all means, you are welcome to reach out to me if you have questions. You can reach me by email. The easiest email for me is speech@yaruss.com. YARUSS, just my last name, speech@yaruss.com, or through Stuttering Therapy Resources. I use my first initial J. I'm J Scott at stutteringtherapyresources.com, or at the university, my initials, JSY at msu.edu. So lots of ways to reach me. You can find all of those on my website. It's yaruss.com or at Stuttering Therapy Resources. Again, thank you for listening to this video. Please reach out if there's anything that I can do to help you help people who stutter.